Cageside with John Morgan.
And welcome, everybody. Another edition of Cageside with John Morgan. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. We did not record last week. No episode in observance of Juneteenth. But dang, did we get to miss a recap of how good Jared Cannonier looked in his fight against Marvin Vettori? Or did we not get a chance to recap how damn tough Marvin Vettori is? Or both. But we'll dive into that. Also, Ilia Topuria just dismantles Josh Emmett, who just wouldn't quit. But there could be a case made of should the towel have been thrown in. We'll dive into that today, as well as a fun card that was UFC on ABC 5. Looking forward to both the Apex this weekend, Strickland versus Magomedov, and the big UFC 290 2 weeks away, Volkanovski, Yair Rodriguez. But let's start first with the potential battle of the billionaires, Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg. Before I get into that, I want to bring in my co-host, the man. His name is on the marquee. You can follow him on Twitter, JohnMorgan_MMA. His name is John Morgan. What's up, pal?
I'm good, man. You laid it out. There's so much to talk about. There's been so much happening, especially with us taking a week away in observance of Juneteenth, but so much coming up, man. We're starting a Las Vegas run. I love the home games. Back to the Apex, back to International Fight Weekend. As you said, this madness of this battle of the billionaires. There's just so much going on, man.
I mean, listen, I'm all in on this. Like, I'm here for it, but let's tell you how we got here. So on Twitter, Elon Musk throws up a tweet. I'm sure Earth can't wait to be exclusively under Zuck's thumb with no other option. Elon Musk, or I'm sorry, a Twitter person, just a follower, responds to Elon Musk, says, watch out, Zuckerberg trains jiu-jitsu. Then Elon Musk responds to that, I'm up for a cage match if he is. Then Zuckerberg jumps into the mix, and he throws out, like, to me, just one of the most classic lines you can throw out there. Send me location. Now, let's go back to the whole beef between Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov. That's what Khabib kept on saying. Send me location. Send me location. So Zuckerberg uses that, says send me location, shows that this guy's a fan too, right? Mm-hmm. To then Elon Musk responds, Vegas Octagon. John, this is crazy. Take it from here, because I know then Dana White interjected himself into this a little bit.
Yeah, Dana White has interjected himself into it quite a bit and says, yeah, I'm absolutely open to it. He's talked to TMZ, some other outlets, and said, hey, listen, I've been in contact with both these guys, and they're absolutely serious about it. And he says, I would absolutely love to put this together. It would be the biggest pay-per-view of all time. More people would want to tune into this for anything else. And he said, look, we'll do it for charity. You know, we'll raise a bunch of money for charity along the way, and he's absolutely into it. He's catching a ton of heat for it. People are saying, oh, I thought you weren't into freak show fights, and I thought you weren't into gimmick fights. But I think those people are kind of missing the point of what this is. Right. I think Dana White is right here. This is something that would not be a normal UFC event. It's not as if it would be some kind of, oh, this is the next wave of fighters we're bringing into the octagon. This would be a chaotic, madness, insane one-off event that people over the world would want to tune in and watch. And listen, if they're going to make it happen, I'm definitely applying for a press credential, man. I want to be there. It's going to be crazy. I want to see it come together, though.
If you want to talk about the press coverage that this would get, this could go down like as the wall in Germany coming down. It could get that level of press coverage, right? It would be worldwide press coverage of the likes which we've probably never seen if this really went down.
It would be unbelievable. Throughout my entire career, I've always said, man, the 1 week that I remember doing more interviews and talking to more mainstream media outlets than any other was Mayweather-McGregor. The only thing that would rival that was the week that the UFC came back during COVID, and that was because nobody had anything else to talk about sports-related. And it was a big historical, important moment in history. But that matchup between Mayweather and McGregor was the one in terms of sporting terms that did the most, because I was talking to a lot of boxing media. I was talking to a lot of mainstream media, in addition to just the traditional circle of mixed martial arts media that covers the sport week in and week out. this would take things to an entirely different level. And I think it's important because it feels like a lot of people within the sport are kind of offended by the idea that this would come together. And I'm a little bit surprised. I kind of understand it to a degree, but I think you have to understand what you're talking about here. Again, this is not trying to put Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg next to any other athlete on the UFC roster and say that, oh, that's comparable. You know, they would get absolutely waxed by any fighter on the UFC roster today. But the two of them together, that's all of a sudden a little bit interesting. As you said, it's going to appeal to people all over the globe for many numerous reasons. Some that want to hate on either one of the guy, but that's what it's about. So listen, I am in for the madness. I kind of want to see this chaos come together.
And the one thing about sports is like when politics come into play, right? Like politics would directly come into play. Now, just let's if you live under a rock and you don't know who these two guys are, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO, founder of Facebook, the parent company, Meta, Elon Musk, everything he does, SpaceX, Tesla, and now the owner of Twitter. So going back and forth through all this, we know historically speaking, over the last couple of years, you know, Facebook has been the one to kind of like censor people and do those things. Rightfully, wrongfully, I'm not going to interject my opinion. Elon Musk buys Twitter to make sure that does not happen ever on his platform. And so now you have these rivaling ideologies back and forth. And you would take these two ideologies and meet them in the center of a cage? Holy moly.
Well, and I tell you what, I just love it because you're talking about two dudes that absolutely do not have to get into a cage fight, right? I mean, that is it. They don't need to do this to make their living. They're doing okay, but they want to put their money where their mouth is. You know, they want to put the things on the line and let's go and let's get in there. And it does get interesting, right? Because Zuckerberg is training, right? Like we've seen him, these stories have surfaced of him showing up at grappling tournaments and how did he perform and did he get choked out and did he go to sleep or whatever, but at least he's out there doing it and he's jumping into competitions. Meanwhile, Elon Musk is not, but Elon Musk is a lot larger human being than Mark Zuckerberg is. There's a big size difference between the two of them. So, listen, that's what I'm interested in this because it's chaos. It's crazy. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity of something like this coming together. People of this magnitude are not often talking about let's jump into an octagon and have a cage match with each other. And so that's why I'm down for it. And to me, I don't think it detracts from everything else that's going on out there. I don't think it detracts from the UFC's primary product because, listen, bottom line is you're going to see these dudes get in there and fight if they sign up and do it. And after it's over, you're going to go, oh, that's what relatively untrained people fighting looks like. It's not pretty. It's not what I normally see on Saturday night. Everybody thinks they can go in there and do it until they go in there and do it. And then they go, whoa, those guys that really do it are really, really good.
So Dana White gave that TMZ interview, I believe it was TMZ interview, and he said that Mark Zuckerberg called him and said, hey, is this guy serious? To Dana White's reply, I don't know. Let me call Elon. Let me find out. Calls Elon. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. I'll do it. I'm in. It seems like they're having fun with it rather than like angry or anything with each other. But let's get back to that like over-under percentage. Do you put this at an over-under 25% chance?
That's a good line to put it at because I thought you were going to go 50 and I'd have a little. I would lean to the under. Like I love the discussion. I love the talk about it. It does seem that they're really wanting to move in the right direction, especially when you add in a charitable component to it as well. That would be massive. I mean, you're talking about two individuals this wealthy. I mean, heck, if you want to add in Dana White as a rather wealthy individual that's trying to promote this thing as well. So if you want to add, three people of that wealth and power, doing this for no charity, I think that would be a bad deal. But if you can really raise a lot of money for some good organizations and good opportunities, I think that would be a good thing. There are still going to be some board of directors of companies that might recommend to each of those men that they not put their health and safety on the line or even their reputation on the line. So that's something. Then you do have to get, commissions involved. I would assume it would take place in Las Vegas, Nevada. I would imagine the commission would have to sign off on it. Do you compete?
I don't see that happening.
An amateur bout? Yeah, it's interesting
because of the size disparity.
The size disparity is a big one. How do you make? They don't do open weight class events here in Nevada. So how do you make that happen? And then if you do know that one person is training and the others, I don't know for a fact that Elon has never trained, but I've never seen anything or any, I've never heard him talking about being in there and training and that sort of thing. So, the known skill disparity between the two would be interesting as well. So there are some hurdles to overcome. It's not just as easy as, hey, let's just go jump in a cage and fight.
Mm-hmm.
There would be some issues. I mean, does insurance cost get in the way? Like, you're talking about two dudes that have some pretty, important careers. And I could see some companies, as I said, some board of directors being like, no, don't get in there. So who knows? A lot of hurdles, but 25, I'll say over 25.
All right. From the commission aspect, I was going to say under 25, but hey, when there's that much money on the line, dude, anything is possible. So what is hysterical about all this is not that the fact that it's floated out there, not that the fact that each one has agreed to it in principle. What's hysterical to me about it is everybody jumping on one camp or the other. John
right.
Jones says, hey, Zuck, I'm here for you training. Then you have, I don't know, dozen others saying, Elon, I got you. So like, I don't know what this speaks to. Does it speak to like a geopolitical climate? Does it speak to, hey, I'm partial to Tesla, I like Tesla? I don't know what it speaks to, but it's hysterical to me.
It is really good. Like, can you imagine? Because I've seen the same thing you have. The number of athletes, UFC high-level athletes that have responded and say, I'll train you, I'll corner you, I'll help you out. Can you imagine the corners that these two guys could put together? I mean, we'd have to make an exception. I know it's not a championship fight, but we go 4 cornermen deep on each side. We give them the extra one. And I mean, can you imagine if we just had like UFC champions on each side? And I mean, that would be part of the show, part of the whole thing. It would be a blast. It would be chaos. I mean, anybody that's embracing this is like, yes, I want to see this because it would be a high-level MMA contest. Of course not. But that's the thing is, you just embrace it. It's like, this would be insane. Like, what are we doing here? Listen, I was kind of the same way with Mayweather and McGregor, where when it started coming together, I'm like, guys, you do understand that these are two entirely different sports, and Floyd Mayweather is a master of this. And as much as I love Conor McGregor and as great as that left hand is, this is like a near impossible task for him to accomplish. In the same way that if Floyd Mayweather ever stepped into a UFC cage, it would not be pretty for Pretty Boy Floyd. It would be ugly. This will not be a high-level mixed martial arts contest. It will be ugly. It will be chaos. It will be wild. But I embrace the madness of it, man.
It'll be very pale. It will be very pale. Like, both of these guys do not tan.
I mean, Venom might actually ask to not be part of that. They were like, do not forsake our uniforms by putting these two dudes in them. They will look terrible on them. Get some other uniform sponsor in there, Like, it would be crazy. But just, I mean, embrace the madness. Like, that is the thing about fight sport is, yes, we love determining who's number one and really finding out the best in the world and who's the pound for pound great. But every now and then, you just want some chaos, man. Think back to the freak show fights in Japan and all them. I mean, sometimes those end up being the most memorable, events. So I don't know. It's been weird to see everybody kind of jumping on the UFC. I can't believe you'd entertain this. Come on, man. Step aside. This is chaos. Let's make it happen.
Those are just people that are going to hate on Dana for he could book the greatest thing ever. They're going to have a problem with it. I do got to say this last one thing. From what I do know of Elon Musk, from what I've read and what I've seen, I mean, and it's probably the same for Mark Zuckerberg, but not as many stories about how much of an alien he is as Elon Musk is. And like, I think Elon Musk, he even has like Asperger's to some degree or not,
yep.
right?
Yep.
But I could see him being so driven. If this gets, I can envision this, that he's taken his private plane to Dagestan for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. I could envision that just over the course of his career, how driven this guy has been and how like laser focused. And I want to see if it happens. You imagine him getting in Khabib's camp.
Listen, man. You make a good point. Look, and listen, I'm just thinking about it, as you mentioned that, because I think you're 100% right. I think both these guys do have the luxury of saying, you know what, I'm stepping away from it. This is going to be my sole focus for the next 8 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever it's going to be. Can you imagine the content that would be created around that? Like the views and the interest that would be generated. It would be shown on Twitter. It would be shown on Facebook. It would be shown on mainstream media outlets everywhere. The journeys of these two getting ready. I mean, It would be. Listen, I know it may sound annoying to everybody, but I agree with Dana White on this. It would be the biggest pay-per-view, the biggest fight in the history of combat sports, which is insane, but it would be.
It would be the biggest pay-per-view in the history of anything. It would be it would break all, like a get-in ticket would be probably $2,000, $3,000 a get-in ticket.
Can you imagine the demand? I mean, where would they do it? I mean, maybe I imagine you'd probably do it at the Apex just so you have like a more controlled environment, a more secure environment. But can you imagine what the demand for tickets would be to get into that? And again, if you're doing it for a charitable function, maybe it's $10,000 a seat if you want to be in here or whatever. Maybe even more than that. I mean, gosh, it would be crazy. And it's because it might be the worst fight in the history of mixed martial arts. It might be the absolute worst fight. And I've seen some amateur fights. I've seen some bad fights. It might end up being the worst fight you ever see, but I'm telling you, people would pay to see it.
I would.
I'm in.
I'm all in. All right, so let's get off the sideshow. Let's get back into the real deal. This past weekend, UFC on ABC5, Ilia Topuria just looked unbelievable. What else is there to say about this guy? Undefeated, I believe 14-0 now. I don't have his record right in front of me. I believe he's 14-0. And coming off maybe a little bit of questions off this Bryce Mitchell fight that he had last, because Bryce Mitchell then came out, said he had the flu and yada, yada, yada. So you still kind of had a little bit of an asterisk by his name. No more. This guy is we already knew he was the real deal, but he is the real deal. He is gonna be a bona fide star, I believe. And he is phenomenal everywhere. I mean, he subbed Bryce Mitchell. Then he just batters this weekend. Josh Emmett. It was unbelievable performance.
No, I've been super high on Ilia Topuria since I first got a chance to see him, coming up on the regional scene and then making it in the UFC. Like, I think the guy has all the skills necessary to compete at the highest level. And he's had some kind of false starts along the way, because he's had a lot of fights fall apart. Like, he hasn't really had a chance. I mean, he's beat some tough guys. I mean, you look at Yusuf Zalal, highly respected. Damon Jackson, highly respected. Ryan Hall, I mean, amazing Ryan Hall, a specialist to be sure. Jaya Herbert, now you mentioned Bryce Mitchell, all great names, but he's also had some big names fall apart. Mo Sarabloev, Charles Jourdain, Edson Barbosa. Those were all fights that were supposed to happen that didn't. This fight finally came together. It was on network television. It was against a very, very tough Josh Emmett, and I thought he looked phenomenal. I mean, Ilia Topuria, to me, has the complete package. He's got phenomenal grappling. He's so quick and accurate on the feet. I mean, just lacing the combinations together, the speed, the way he rolls with the shots. I mean, Josh Emmett hit him with a couple big shots, but Ilia does a good job of kind of rolling with it and not taking the big damage off it. And I think he's got the skills. He's part of this growing contingent of Georgian fighters, man. The Georgian athletes that are coming through right now, they are starting to really make a name for themselves. But he's also got the association of living and training in Spain, and you saw some of Spain's biggest athletes made their way to Florida. I mean, world-renowned soccer, football, however you want to refer to it, players that are there for him. I mean, unbelievable. The guy's got some swag. I mean, if we're not just talking about fighting skills, if we're talking about, the nice suits and the shades and the swag as he walks in, to me, the guy's got the whole package. I think he can absolutely contend for a title. There's a pretty good champion up at the top of that division and a couple of other nice contenders along the way. But to me, Ilia Topuria, right there at the top.
At this rate, is he one win away? And who kind of like fantasy booked that for me?
Yeah, I think he still needs probably one more fight. I mean, we got to see how things play out, right? I mean, we do have a championship matchup coming up later this month, or in a couple of weeks, I should say, in July. So we'll see how that plays out. You do have Max Holloway and Chan Sung Jung that looks like they're going to be fighting in Singapore. I saw a lot of people saying, maybe Chan Sung Jung, maybe Max Holloway, but obviously he's tied up there, so I don't think that's the fight. I like maybe an Arnold Allen fight. I know Arnold Allen is coming off a loss, but that's another highly ranked contender. Brian Ortega is there as well. Brian Ortega's there as well, though. Brian Ortega's been linked to Giga Chikadze. That fight hasn't been announced yet, but Brian Ortega's coming. So there's some names, but I think, to be honest with you, I see some people saying that Ilia Topuria's next fight should be for a title. I will say this. If he happened to be the guy just based on scheduling and based on needs, I certainly wouldn't argue that at all. I think he's that good, and I think he's deserving that opportunity. But if you want to leave no question, if you want to leave no doubt, I think you give him one more fight to really prove that that's the guy.
I think the fight to make, if I were to put on my matchmaker, since this title fight is so close, is the loser of this title fight. That's going to be that's going to be the determining factor. If he takes out Rodriguez or wins a close decision, or or can solve that riddle, say if Rodriguez doesn't get past Volkanovski, which is a heavy underdog, I mean, the timing works on that.
Yeah, it does, because they'd be almost on the exact same skill. I think that's a solid option as well. And I think the only way that doesn't work is if Yair wins, because if Yair Rodriguez does pull the upset against Alexander Volkanovski, Volkanovski has absolutely earned the instant rematch opportunity, right? I mean, for everything that he was willing to do with Max Holloway, I think he's earned that. So that's the only way it doesn't work. But I think you're right. If Alexander Volkanovski wins, man, Yair and Ilia Topuria, who wouldn't sign up for that? What a phenomenal fight that would be.
So Josh Emmett, game in defeat, like hella game, but he took a beating. And it went from I'm waiting for that one shot to land because he always lands it, to then and being cautiously and being optimistic that this fight is going to turn at some point and get interesting, and then it got to a point where that ref is in a tough spot, because it was always patters and it was hard shots, but they weren't ever flurries of finishing blows. So the ref can't really jump in and stop it. But Josh Emmett is just taking a beating. And I found myself watching it being like, man, I almost feel like he's too tough for his own good. I almost feel sorry about what I'm watching. And it begs the question, does his corner, should they have thrown in the towel? Probably after that third round. Maybe midway through the fourth. Definitely if you're going to say this is the time, going into 5.
I mean, yeah, to be honest with you, I thought the doctor was going to stop it going into 5. And when they didn't, I will say I respected the heck out of Josh Emmett to just be, the doctor was like, he can fight. But then he looked at him and was like, do you want to fight? And Josh was like, yeah, absolutely want to fight. And the doctor tried to cover up the mic, so he could be the bad guy if necessary. And Josh is like, no, I want to fight. And then what does he do? He turns to the crowd and says, let's go. We're going to go do this for another 5 minutes. And you got to respect a warrior like that.
Yeah.
So, anybody that packs the power that Josh Emmett does, that does have the opportunity to end the fight at any moment with one big shot, I understand why the corner gives him a little bit longer leash. And I do understand in mixed martial arts why the leash is a little bit longer than it is with boxing as well, right? I mean, with boxing, you only have one means of attack, and that is punching. And when you see that the punching is just not there, especially if you're more of a volume striker than a power hitter, so I would never fault corners for jumping in a little bit sooner. And I think it's a culture that needs to happen more often. It needs to be more open in mixed martial arts, because we don't see, let's be honest, we don't see as many corner stoppages in MMA as we do in boxing. And I think it's for those reasons I just lined out. So I didn't hate the fact that they let him fight on, and it did just make me admire the warrior spirit of Josh Emmett that much more. And he is, look, at 38, maybe you're not necessarily trying to preserve, several more years of competition and that sort of thing. So I think there's a number of factors that gone in there. But I will say, I didn't look at the corner's behavior as bad, or as they dropped the ball by not stopping this, I certainly wouldn't have argued with them if they did.
That's a no-win situation, because at one point you got to let him go out on his shield. We've heard that terminology probably used way too much. You're right. There's one shot changes the complexion in any fight, but especially a Josh Emmett fight. One shot, right. Ask Michael Johnson that, right? So, but Emmett wasn't getting close either, though. That was kind of the thing. And you're right. I thought just kind of that damage and the eye starting to swell shut may have led the doctor to stop it, but the doctor isn't in there to stop fights unless he can't see, or, some sort of major injury. And this is what people need to know. And as me as a referee, the doctor, when the doctor comes in, are these things going to cause permanent damage? Permanent. Like, is this cut above the eye where he can't see going to cause permanent damage? A lot of times when people get cut on the eyelid, they can still see, but they take another shot, it's going to rip their freaking eyelid off or destroy their eye. That's why the fight gets stopped. Or if the eye is swelled shut, now he can't see anything coming from that side. He has, instead of, three-dimensional vision, now he doesn't have that anymore. Permanent damage.
And he passed the test. He passed the test.
And if you're swelled up, that's not permanent damage. So the ref can't really make that determination there.
Yeah, 100%.
Or I'm sorry,
No,
the doctor.
the doctor made the exact right determination. It didn't look like anything that's going to be permanent damage. I thought it was just because I thought the eye was closed all the way shut from the perspective of just a television viewer. But the doctor went in there, to his credit. He covered up the good eye, and he was like, hey, what fingers do you see? And Josh passed the test. So I had no problem with the doctor letting it go. And I love the fact that the doctor took the time to say, hey, do you want to keep fighting? Like, and took the time to cover up the microphone, like, hey, do you want to keep fighting? And he said yes, and he wanted to. So I had no problem with it being a non-stoppage. I will say this, though, and it's funny, I was thinking about it as you talked about it, because we do hear a lot, let the guy go out on a shield. Let's not forget where that came from, okay? To go out on your shield means that you die in battle, all right? We're not trying to let a guy die in battle, all right? We say that far too often. Let the guy go out on his shield. Like, hold on, let's let the guy, let's not let that happen. So listen, man, Josh Emmett's a warrior. I don't know how many, big fights he has left. He's a classy individual. From all accounts, I think he's done pretty well financially for himself in terms of, like, he's not a big flashy guy. Like, I don't see him out there just burning through cash. He seems to live, a very humble lifestyle. And again, one of the nicest dudes you'll ever meet. So hopefully, especially off these bigger fights lately, he's been able to bank a lot of that and plan for the future. Not that I'm trying to say he can't compete at a high level, because he can. He's coming off of 2 very devastating losses, but it's a guy that's about to fight for a title and a guy that we just said probably should fight for a title next. So you're talking about losing against the absolute best in the world. I think he's still got some great fights left in him. Maybe it'll turn out that, it's not his future to become a UFC champion, but, certainly at 38, I think he still has the ability to compete at a high level if he so chooses to.
I've got no problem with the doctor. I got no problem with this corner. The only thing I got a problem with is that I wish he wouldn't have taken that damage, but such is the game that these guys decide to play, and we pay to see it. So there you go.
That's it. Can't take it away from them. That's what they love to do.
Co-main event, Maycee Barber versus Amanda Ribas, and it looks like the future may be present right now. Little inside Maycee, the future Barber. The future may be present right now after her 5th consecutive victory. How good did she look? I mean, I haven't seen her striking on that level ever.
No, it looked well developed, and she looked fantastic. And you're right. I mean, Maycee Barber, 25 years old. Hey, we talked about it going into this fight, right? Is that a lot of people are, I think, kind of undervaluing her and not really, giving her the respect that she deserves. And I think it's just because a lot of people, if I'm being honest, don't like Maycee Barber, because she came in as this young kid that was like,
I'm going to be the youngest champion ever.
Yeah. Got the countdown timer on her phone of what it would take to beat John Jones' record as the youngest champ. And I just think that soured a lot of people, because they're like, who are you? And let's be honest, just started talking trash about Roxanne Modafferi, who's a very much beloved member of the mixed martial arts community. And people are like, why are you talking trash about her? I mean, just they didn't like her. But I just always felt bad for her, because she was such a young kid. I mean, I think about the age that she came into the UFC at, and the things that I was saying, if you stuck a camera, a microphone in front of me when I was that age, a teenager coming up, you don't know. And it's so weird, right? Because it's this era where we say, like, hey, it's not just enough, by the way, to win fights. You need to be entertaining. You got to sell us as well. But you're 19, you're 20. You don't really know how to be, like, subtle, and you don't necessarily have a well-developed game in terms of full entertainment. So you're saying some things. You're doing what you think you're supposed to. So bottom line is, I think a lot of people have turned on Maycee Barber, and because of that, they don't want to give her the credit that she deserves. But this performance right here, again, on network television against a very, very tough opponent in Amanda Ribas, I think, you got to give Maycee Barber a lot of credit. I don't think she's necessarily, okay, now she's up for a title shot next, but now at 25 years old, I think now she's coming into her athletic prime. She's matured as an individual. She's matured in her game. I think now you're really going to see her develop as a contender in that division.
Coming off those 2 losses, now one of them she blew out her knee versus Roxanne Modafferi. So,
yep.
That, let's put an asterisk by that one. Yeah, right. And then the other one, no shame in that loss. So really, let's say she has right?
Yeah,
so,
think about it. The other loss she has, if you don't know, by the way, the last time she lost was to Alexa Grasso, which at the time you go, oh, Alexa's pretty good. Oh, well, that's matured very well. That has aged just nicely. So, yes.
So that's what I'm saying. Her 2 losses are there, and one of which she blew out her knee in the fight. And then she starts a string of victories, starting with Miranda Maverick, and we know how damn tough she is. So, Maycee Barber's a real deal. Little side story to this is I got to see Maycee Barber fight on the regional scene.
Nice.
I traveled. Me and my wife traveled to Dallas to watch a good friend of mine, Jaleel Willis. He headlined an LFA card versus a guy named Kyle Stewart. Kyle Guns Up Stewart.
Sure.
And you remember him, right?
Of course.
And Greg Hardy was on the undercard of that fight, making his pro debut, and then Maycee Barber led off the main card.
That's pretty wild. I love it.
Now look at this. Kyle Stewart made the UFC. Jaleel is doing good things in Bellator. We all knew Greg Hardy, and then Maycee Barber. That was a hell of a card that I went to.
I'm telling you, man. That's why I love, going to the regional events. Why I love being a part of organizations like CFFC. It's just because you got to get to see this talent and you see him developing, and I enjoy that, man. There's nothing more than I love seeing, guys and girls kind of live their dream and to see him chasing it in those early stages. That was a hell of a card. Yeah,
it really was. Now, on to possibly the worst eye poke I have ever seen in a mixed martial arts. Now, I may not be remembering, but I yelled at my wife, Jamie, you have to see this. And then they put it in slow motion. Let's kind of recap. Justin Tafa versus Austin Lane ends in a no contest. Tafa took a horrendous. Anyway, he slipped a punch and just so happens throw that 1-2 and then, kind of blocking to see if anything came back. And Lane it looked like 3 fingers deep. I don't know if it was his eyeball bleeding or if his eyelid bleeding or underneath his eye bleeding, but blood was coming out of his eye. And when they put it in slow motion, like it almost made me nauseous.
Yeah, they replayed it once. I was like, I never need to see that again. I don't need to. It was really one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. We've seen that over the years. It is weird, man, when you see a bad eye poke, like that happen. Think about Bilal Muhammad and Leon Edwards, right? You see it go in there and you see the digits like disappearing into the eye socket. And with Bilal, of course, he couldn't see, and so he panicked and was kind of. He was panicking. He was scared because he had no vision in his eye. And this one was bad because, as you said, it looked like 2 or 3 fingers were a couple knuckles deep into this man's skull, which is just disgusting to think about. And then the blood's coming down, which, again, that can be a lot of different things. But anytime you see a man's eyes swollen up and blood coming out of it, and concerning, very, very concerning. It was disturbing. And it was unfortunate because, number one, those 2 heavyweights have an insane finisher. There was a reason they were on the main card. One of them being that Austin Lane used to play professional football in Jacksonville. So for a lot of people that maybe were scratching their heads going, why is this on the main card of network television? Look, there was this nice little tie-in to the local community. And so, Austin Lane, who had a rough go to get into the UFC and had to kind of rebuild his way, this was going to be a big moment for him. And just unfortunate all the way around. And, again, it seems like Justin Tafa is going to be okay, but man, it was scary in the moment. It about made me nauseous too. It was pretty disgusting. Saw it once and I was like, we don't need to see that again.
Well, I watched it multiple times because I had to get my wife in the room for her to watch it. And she's like, is his eyeball bleeding? And I'm like, I have no idea. I have no idea. But this is what I want to talk about. Like how tough Tafa was in that moment. We want to talk about one of the toughest humans on earth, Bilal Muhammad, the way he reacted, right? This eye poke, possibly worse, if nothing else, equally as bad, right? But visually, it was worse.
Oh, visually was terrible.
And he just kind of grabs his eye at first, turns away. The doctors come in, they give him the whole 5 minutes. And you can hear on the mic, the doctor's trying to cover it up, but he's telling the referee, like, it's getting worse as time is going on. It's not improving. Yeah. It's getting worse.
It's funny because we talk about the ability to allow these men and women to fight, right? And to do what they love and to compete and to, possibly fight for a win bonus and possibly fight for a performance bonus and all those things. But yeah, like as that whole thing was unfolding, I got to be honest with you, my only thought was, guys, we do not have to wait for this clock to expire. Like, let's just get this dude out of here and make sure that he's okay. I mean, if we want to rebook this in a couple of weeks, we can do that. You know what I mean? Like, let's make sure this guy can see, because the eyes always scare me, because that is one of the things that, you lose your eyesight. Obviously, let's just talk about, life appreciation in itself. Having your vision on a daily basis or whatever, but your fighting career is instantly over. You know what I mean? Like, you're no longer going to be able to get licensed anymore if you have sight out of one eye. So it just scared the heck out of me. And I was kind of thinking, can we just get this dude out of here and go get some medical attention for him? But to your point, man, Justin Tafa, man, if you need, all tough teams, you know what I mean? I hear people say, hey, man, if a bar fight was going down, who would you want on your squad? Pick your crew. Tafa might be one of my boys because he's just like, what? Like, all right, let's go. I mean, just unbelievable. The only dude that I think I might have seen up close tougher than that dude would be in that CFFC event when Hetek Pliev lost his finger and they're trying to get him out of there, and he's just like, no, I can fight. There's still one more round left. It's like, you have no finger, bro. You got to get out of here.
I refed his next fight in CFFC, and that was the infamous giant moth fight.
Oh yeah. I forgot about that. Oh my gosh. What was that?
I had to anybody, you could probably find this on YouTube. CFFC fight. It was that guy you were just talking about, his first fight off of coming back after losing a finger and facing a former UFC guy. I forgot who was in there. And this bat-looking creature comes through the cage so much that both the fighters jump back and I jump back and I'm like, hold on, time out. This thing was this moth was probably that big?
That was that thing had somehow migrated from the depths of the Amazon rainforest to Tunica, Mississippi that night. That was unbelievable, man. We had so much so that even the cameraman had to zoom in on that. What is this thing?
Oh man,
that's funny.
But yeah, so anyways, wild but really, really fun card. I have to drop this. There was a fighter, and I've reffed him multiple times. He made his UFC debut on that card. Jose Mariscal, Chepe. Now, if you guys want to go look up a guy who took the hard route to the UFC, I think he's 14-6, but all his 6 losses came off to guys who ended up contending for UFC, or making really, really good strides in the UFC. He finally gets his chance. He's on the undercard here and just puts up, which I thought was going to be fight of the night. And I got to give credit where credit's due, because I love seeing these guys who they didn't take an easy fight their entire career. And this Chepe is one of them. I reffed him on twice. Soriano in CFFC, and I reffed him against Bryce Mitchell on a V3 card. V3 then ended up merging with CFFC. So I reffed him and Bryce Mitchell, and then I reffed his other fight versus Soriano, I believe his name is. But he even beat
Pat
in the UFC
Sabatini.
just fought last week.
He has wins. He has key wins over USS Salal and Pat Sabatini.
He even beat Pat Sabatini. And if anybody's looking for somebody who's UFC ready, it's a guy like that. Did you happen to catch his undercard fight?
Yeah. The fight, it was one of the most entertaining fights tonight. So, by the way, let me just speak to your point. His losses in his career thus far: Gregor Gillespie, Frank Buenafuente, Bryce Mitchell, Joe Anderson Brito, Steve Garcia, Sean Soriano. I mean, to get those kind of tests early in your career are incredible. But this fight with Trevor Peek, and by the way, shout out to Trevor Peek as well. This to me, just two of the toughest dudes that you could ever have at it. And it was wild because I actually tweeted at the time. I was like, man, give these guys all the money. These two dudes laid it out there. They just did everything you could ask of anybody going there. It was entertaining. It was courageous. It was hard. And I had somebody say, well, yeah, but it was kind of sloppy. It wasn't like UFC level. I'm like, man, you're kind of missing the point. Okay, some of the stuff Trevor Peek does, he's just a straight up street fighter out there brawling, but the durability of these two guys, the heart of these two guys to go in there and for this to be your UFC debut for unbelievable performance from Mariscal. So yeah, I love this fight. I told a lot of people that night, if you're going to catch one undercard fight, go catch that one, man. It's worth your time to go rewatch it. These two dudes put it all on display.
And just seeing his Bryce Mitchell loss was a highly controversial loss too. And that was in Bryce Mitchell's hometown, or right across the border. It was here in Memphis, Tennessee. And man, I'm actually just really happy for the guy, because I've reffed him on numerous occasions and I've never seen him fight somebody who wasn't coming out of the UFC or going into the UFC on that next fight. So shout out, just wanted to tell everybody that you could look at guys that are UFC ready that took the hard road. He is one of them.
And there's value in that. And I think a lot of people, and I get it, man, I totally understand it, whether it be amateurs that are just, itching to turn pro, or whether it be pros that are just itching to make it to the UFC. I get it, right? In both aspects, I understand you're trying to get that next level of financial income, and it's totally understandable if that's the goal. But there is a little bit of something to be said for gaining that little extra bit of experience, so that once you get there, you're prepared to stay there, because that's what you really want. You don't just want to make it to the UFC or any of the other high-level major organizations. You want to stay in those high-level major organizations once you get there.
And I didn't think the fight was sloppy. I can understand why people say that. What you have to understand is the pace of that fight through 3 rounds was insanity. And of course, technique is going to get a little sloppy towards the end. But Mariscal, he was high and tight the whole time, landing huge shots. And then obviously Peak is as unconventional as it gets, throwing punches and then whipping a back fist right back around. Highly entertaining, but to me, it was an unorthodox versus a very orthodox, well-rounded fighter. And that's just the way the product ends up, but it was highly, highly technical fight.
I completely agree. We like those brawls every now and then. That's what's wild. A little bit of unpredictability, a little bit of chaos in there is fun. So I thought that was fun. I'm glad you shouted that out. I just want to give a quick shout out to Brendan Allen as well, man. That dude, not only did he have a phenomenal performance, but then on the mic as well, he's making sure the champion knows that he's on his way to him. He's calling out an opportunity to compete in his home state of Louisiana, but giving, all the respect to Dustin Poirier as well. Then he's calling for a sponsorship with Chipotle as well. I mean, I don't know if you could use your time on the mic any better, but the performance itself was great as well. And it's a performance that'll go down as a first-round submission because he does have great grappling skills, but it's a submission that was earned through his fantastic striking skills and getting it done on the feet, hurting his opponent, and then getting it done. Brendan Allen, man, a young guy that has a lot of experience, and, man, I thought this was a phenomenal performance from him.
2 weeks away, pay-per-view UFC 290. I'm looking forward to this one, and I got to say, I feel disrespected for Yair Rodriguez right now. I feel he's being a little disrespected by the odds maker. Volkanovski is a minus 460 favorite. Minus 460. Volkanovski, obviously the greatest champion that division's ever seen. I'm not discrediting that. He is unbelievable. Minus 460 against a guy who is so unconventional, hard to hit, phenomenal grappling all the way around. It's crazy to me.
It is wild to me. Listen, to a lot of people, Alexander Volkanovski is the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter on the planet right now. I still have John Jones to me, even with the layoff, because of his domination, because he came back to heavyweight. I have John Jones, but I've got Alexander Volkanovski as a very solid number 2 pound-for-pound fighter on the planet. So I get that. In a lot of ways, I feel like that line is maybe just showing the respect that people have for Alexander Volkanovski, how good he has looked, how, he takes the toughest challenges available, right? I mean, hey, man, let's go face Islam Makhachev. Like, yeah, that's right. I'll move up and I'll take that on. Max Holloway, I don't care if he's earned it or not. Let's do it again. Let's go 3 times. I mean, the guys
better every time.
Look better every time. The destruction of the Korean Zombie, man, one of the most highly respected guys out there. I mean, wins over Aldo Mendez. Like, I get it. I am an Alexander Volkanovski fan, man.
And being able to get out of those Brian Ortega mounted guillotines.
Oh my gosh, that I thought he was done. That unfolded right in front of me, and I thought for sure, I'm like, well, he's got it. He's over, and somehow just never gave up. I mean, I'm a fan of this guy as a person, and I'm a fan of him as a fighter, man. He is just, to me, I love Alexander Volkanovski, but I agree. Yair Rodriguez is dangerous, man. Is this an uphill battle? Yeah, but is there a guy that's capable of winning an uphill battle like this? Like, absolutely right. And listen, I get it. I could say, people like, well, the win over Ortega, that was a shoulder injury, so what even happened there? Josh Emmett, okay, but now people go, well, Josh Emmett just like, I mean, I get it. I understand why you can make the case against him. I do. But there is just, I mean, Yair is one of the most spectacularly unique, dangerous, unorthodox, unpredictable, athletic, acrobatic athletes we've ever seen. So if there's anybody that can have that one spectacular moment, I mean, that back elbow knockout of Korean Zombie is one of the greatest highlights in UFC history. And I mean, he's throwing leaping kicks. And I mean, look, am I picking Alexander Volkanovski? I absolutely am. But that line, when you mentioned it to me as we were just kind of talking a little bit before we started recording, that to me stands out. Unbelievable.
That card is stacked. Obviously the co-main event is a title fight as well, Moreno versus Pantoja.
Yep.
But is it the only African fighter contender in the UFC versus Robert Whittaker? Ooh, Robert Whittaker. I got to give him credit, right? Robert Whittaker said he's very impressed by Plessis by not taking that easy road to that title shot versus Izzy. Robert Whittaker just seemed like the nicest guy in the world. I'm sure, I haven't looked at the line. I'm sure he's the betting favorite. He's got the experience. I do want to see a third fight with Israel Adesanya, but I got to give credit to Whittaker where credit's due for even acknowledging that.
Yeah, and I just did look at the line. Whittaker is minus 375, so a very significant favorite there. And I understand why. Again, Whittaker, one of the top pound-for-pound fighters on the planet as well. I mean, an incredible athlete. Dricus du Plessis kind of new up into that upper echelon of the division. It is interesting, and I think you do have to give Dricus du Plessis a lot of credit for taking this fight because, look, Israel Adesanya does not like those comments that Dricus has made about being the lone African fighter that's, breathing African air and walking on African soil. And I understand why Izzy hasn't liked those, but he hasn't liked them so much that I kind of thought that Dricus might just get granted a title shot, like no matter where he was, because Adesanya wants to beat him up. And instead, and maybe that's the UFC
Izzy
saying, no, we're not
I bet you Izzy and that fight could have happened.
They could have materialized that to me, honestly. And again, and I've said this and I'll say it again. I'm not so sure how comfortable I am with that being the storyline around a fight. Like that would be pretty uncomfortable going in and the build up to it. But let's be honest, it's enough to build something off of it. But here you take all that out of the equation. Not that it won't still be part of the build up. It will. But here, if Dricus du Plessis can pull off this upset against Robert Whittaker, then Dricus could say, like, I don't care if you like me or not. I don't care if you like my statements or not. You're fighting me because I've earned my way to the position by beating Robert Whittaker, who, is one of the greatest champions this division has ever seen. So high stakes in this matchup.
And we're going to go down that rabbit chute of like kind of breaking down the fights next week. But off the top of your head, Bo Nickel is also on the card. That's going to be awesome. What fight, without breaking it down for us, what fight are you just looking forward to the most?
I mean, maybe just as a fan, knowing that this will be the last time we see Robbie Lawler versus Nico Price. I mean, that's amazing. Robbie Lawler, a true MMA legend. I mean, a future UFC Hall of Famer, a guy that, just has embodied what this sport should be, throughout his career. And to know that that'll be the last time we see him, I mean, that'll be an honor. So some great fights and some big matchups. And, the pay-per-view line that's upcoming for the UFC is insane. But as you said, Bo Nickel, I mean, just continue his continued development and the hype around him. But if I'm just not talking about necessarily, stakes and title fights and all that, and maybe just something that me as a fan, knowing that we're seeing Robbie Lawler for the last time against, by the way, Nico Price, who you got to tune in to watch Nico Price every time because he's coming out there to give you a fight. So that'll be a big one.
This weekend at the Apex Center, they always exciting, they always fun. He was gonna say crazy stuff, win or lose. John Strickland takes off Magomedov in the main event. You're gonna be there. What should we expect out of that fight?
It's a tough fight. Now, a lot of people, when this first got announced, they were like, what? I don't understand why Abus Magomedov is in a main event. And I get that. Like, it's a name that probably a lot of people haven't heard. But I will say, let's just look at the odds on this. A guy that most people probably haven't heard of is only a plus 145 against Sean Strickland, a guy that has been headlining shows and competing up at the top of the division and been in number one contender fights as of late. So that will just go to show you what the odds makers have. Abus is just a guy that a lot of people didn't want to fight, and Sean is one of those guys that doesn't care who you are. Like if you're willing to sign the dotted line, he's ready to compete against you. So that is actually a bigger middleweight fight than a lot of people probably realize because it's a real breakout opportunity for Abus Magomedov, where for Sean Strickland, it's just an opportunity to him to show he is that guy that just will fight anybody, anywhere, anytime. He is that dude. You do have some other key matchups. Tamir Ismagulov against Grant Dawson in the co-main event. That is actually a big one at lightweight as well. Two very, very impressive career records out of those two. And, if I'm just looking all the way down for other things that get my attention, how about Kevin Lee? Kevin Lee's
back in.
He's back in, man.
That shocks me that he's up. Now, okay. What? He got name value, regardless if he's been on the shelf for a while, right? He's got name value to me. He's the underdog in this fight. I want to see him fight. I'm sure other hardcore fans want to see him fight and see what he's going to be like. Why on the undercard, do you think?
Listen, there are reasons sometimes to put some featured matchups in different spots on the card, so you're getting people to tune in early. It's not. I think a lot of people look at it and be like, well, the main event should be the biggest fight, which it should be. The co-main event should be the second biggest fight. The third event should be the third biggest fight. That's not necessarily true. Sometimes you want to give a reason for people to tune in. There's even things that go into like Tatsuro Taira is a guy that's is always on the lower level undercard, and he's an undefeated flyweight prospect that a lot of people are like, why is he on the prelims? Well, because if you put on the prelims, it airs at a better time slot in his native Japan so that the country where he's from can tune in. So with card construction, sometimes there are different things than other who wants to tune in most, because I think you're absolutely right. I do think Kevin Lee is something that people do care about. Now, again, you talk about that name value, but again, Renat Fakhretdinov is the favorite here, a guy that maybe doesn't have that name recognition, but this is a big opportunity for him to say, I can beat a guy like Kevin Lee. This is no gimme matchup for Kevin Lee in his return to it. And to be honest with you, I think Kevin Lee is actually kind of okay with being on the prelims right now. He had so much of a spotlight on him. He had so much attention around him and so much expectations around him that I think were very, very difficult for him to live up to. And I think, at this point, it's crazy to see Kevin Lee just now 30 years old, man. He's just now 30. And you think about all the experience he has. I think in kind of this return to the UFC, he's okay with maybe I fly under the radar a little bit. Like, let me kind of, find my way a little bit before you start, shining the big spotlight on me once again.
Well, they didn't do him any favors with this matchup, though. So, jumping right back into the deep end. But I do want to say, I kind of set you up for that. Why is he on the undercard? Because if you recall back in the tail end of Uriah Faber's career, he preferred to be the undercard featured fight on the undercard, and they always ask him why. Now, this was before the uniform policy and the no sponsorship on the gear, but Uriah Faber says, I can pump my sponsors more. I can get more for sponsorship. More people see me. More people see my sponsors. I make more money. Don't put me on the pay-per-view main card. Put me on the featured prelim.
Yeah, and this is one that's on ESPN and ESPN Plus throughout, so that doesn't necessarily apply to here, but it still applies to the big pay-per-view events 100%. More people are going to see that ESPN prelim than are going to see the pay-per-view. So Uriah was always such a smart business. It remains a smart businessman to this day, and he understood the value of being on there. I can get more eyeballs on the things that I'm trying to do at that point, and he was one of the first guys that really voiced that and made that apparent to people that, hey, it's not about just being on pay-per-view.
All righty, before we end up wrapping up the show, we've talked a lot. Who have we not talked about? Where do we got to put a check mark this week?
Where are we going?
Conor McGregor.
Oh,
Conor McGregor did not, from what we know. Now, we chronicalized the knocking out of Bernie the mascot. I don't want to dig into any of the allegations because as of now, they're still just allegations. No charges have been filed, nothing like that. I don't even want to get into it. But through that craziness, from what we know, now there might be something behind the scenes. USADA, from what I've read, doesn't have to put him on the website. But he did not submit his application or his paperwork. And so from what we are hearing, doesn't appear he's going to be fighting this year. Doesn't appear that he's going to be fighting Michael Chandler and or anybody this year. Have you heard anything different?
No, and you laid it out correctly in that we don't know that 100% right. Now, USADA does have updates on the website, but the only thing they put on there is when tests have come in. So he could be filed and just waiting for that first test, but we certainly haven't heard that. And you've got to think that if it was done, he would be willing to make an announcement. He would want to let everybody know because he'd want to start promoting the fight, and he needs 6 months of testing. Now, again, he said from the beginning, I think I can get past this 6-month thing. I think I can just do the 2 tests, the exceptions that they do allow. I don't think that's going to be the case. We heard a few weeks back when Dana White was saying, well, it's tough to get these guys back together. I mean, he was already kind of laying the groundwork of, yeah, this probably isn't going to be happening. I've heard Michael Chandler giving some statements lately of like, well, maybe first quarter next year, maybe we do something there. So, yeah, it's not looking especially well. We can't rule it out with 100% certainty. It is not looking like Conor McGregor is going to fight in December in Las Vegas as we so much anticipated for so long.
And Dana White may have been tipping his hand in the response to the questions that you laid out for him just, 2 weeks ago that we showed here on this program. But fun episode, a lot to look forward to this week and the weeks coming. But this week, got anything fun coming up?
No, back in town, which is nice. Just had a fun event out in Canada this past weekend. I was watching the UFC show, but I was also working Fight League Atlantic out in New Brunswick, so that was a great time. But now I'm back in town. We got the UFC Apex this week. We got International Fight Week coming up the week after that. Then it's 2 consecutive weeks of CFFC action on the road. First in Tunica, Mississippi, and then in Tampa, Florida. So, man, July is shaping up to be an action-packed month.
Looks like I may see you in person a few times in the next month as well. I will be heading out to Vegas. I'm going to go check out that Apex card, which I'm excited. And me and you are going to get to grab a frosty one either before and or after the fights. And then I am going to be the third man in the cage for that CFFC fight here in Tunica, Mississippi, potentially in Florida as well. So who knows? You know, we'll get to see a lot of each other. Then I know I'm going to be able to be reffing in another card in August out in Arizona. So a lot of good things for both of us coming up. You can check out my man, John Morgan, on Twitter, JohnMorgan_MMA. Read all of his columns, The Underground, mixedmartialarts.com. Also, man, I say this every week, looking for my Just Bleed shirt.
I think you can't trust these shipping companies, man. You know what I mean? It's in process. It's in transit. I think in transit, I believe, is the language they use.
Hey, if you find that tracking number, just get it to me. All right.
I'll get in with my people.
Alrighty, awesome. Well, for John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.